with all these decisions with Donald Trump, you have to get under the skin of why it is that he's attacking a particular country or institution and so on. And I
Yeah.
think there's a very personal element to this as well.
Now, a judge in the US has temporarily blocked the Trump administration's ban on Harvard's enrolment of international students. Harvard says the decision was a blatant violation of the law and an attack on free speech, while Trump says the university is guilty of misconduct and other offences. We can speak now to Brooks Newmark, who is the former president of the Harvard Alumni Association and Conservative Cabinet Minister. Morning to you.
Hi, morning.
What have you made of this intervention by the courts in the US?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because everything Donald Trump is doing is effectively against the law. And this is the problem with Donald Trump, is that he sort of shoots first and then asks questions later. So I think this is, the start of a pattern of behavior with Trump where he'll try and do things, bully people into doing things, but ultimately, hopefully the law will prevail. I think his main argument is Harvard's a private institution, but it receives federal funding. Because it receives federal funding, there has to be some form of government oversight. And I think this is what he's sort of holding on to. Harvard, on the other hand, is arguing more of a First Amendment argument, which is freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on. And I suspect the Constitution ultimately will prevail in this argument. And to be honest, though, I think, a lot of it, is frustrating, for both sides of the argument. And I'm not someone who, and as I said, as a Harvard alum, I argued against the whole DEI agenda. I thought it went way overboard at Harvard. There are a lot of things, to be honest, that there are legitimate criticisms against Harvard. But the way Donald Trump is going about it, I'm afraid he'll be on a losing wicket here.
I mean, you talk about that federal funding, which the White House has frozen. It's $2.2 billion, so £1.7 billion. And this, of course, this move by Trump is affecting international students. There's around 6,000 international students who are enrolled at Harvard. And to give you an idea, just a year's tuition is over £60,000. By the time you chuck everything else in, like food and insurance and housing and everything else, it could be £90,000 a year for students to be there. This is going to be hugely disruptive, and ultimately it's going to really annoy them. They're customers, ultimately, these international students, aren't they?
Well, the thing I do feel sorry most for the students, because imagine that you've had a series of universities you've had an opportunity to go to. You've turned down all the other universities. You've chosen Harvard, or Harvard's chosen you, and you've chosen Harvard. And suddenly you're told, well, actually, you're not going to be permitted to go there. So the people I feel sorriest for are the students who made the decision in the past, let's say, 6 months to go to Harvard, have turned down other universities. And the question is, what happens to them? So there, for me, would be my priority, not necessarily Harvard, which is a $50 billion institution. Yes, it will have a financial impact on Harvard. But I think the broader messaging is that if you're an international student going to the United States, beware. This could happen to any institution that doesn't bend to the will of Donald Trump. He is becoming increasingly autocratic and demanding. He wants to vet not only what Harvard is doing, but really what the professors are lecturing. He wants to see the content. And what's going to happen too, I suspect, is that if you're an international professor, you're someone from overseas that is teaching at a US university, you could be impacted because Donald Trump, in his wisdom, could say, I don't like what this professor is teaching.
What about,
I want this person banned.
Yeah, Brooks, what about what I've heard students say, interviewed, who go to Harvard, who say there is a problem with anti-Semitism on campus, and Harvard should have done more to protect these students? And actually, if Harvard had have done that, maybe Donald Trump's attention wouldn't have been drawn to it.
No, I think that's a bit of a red herring, actually. I'm Jewish. I was part of Hillel at Harvard. And I've had huge problems with this. So I was one of, Bill Ackman, who you may have heard of, has been harshly critical of Harvard on this. I've been harshly critical of the university on it. Certainly, when I was there 40 years ago, anti-Semitism was not an issue at all, even though, obviously there were a lot of issues between Israel and Palestine back in the 70s and 80s when I was there. But it has gotten very bad. It's gotten very bad on all campuses in U.S. universities. So it's not just Harvard. I think in many, I try not to personalize this, but everything with Donald Trump is personal. Okay, whether there was the attack on Panama because his hotel there was blocked and stopped and closed down for money laundering. And I think, with Donald Trump and Harvard, I don't want to personalize it in this way. He tried to get Barron into Harvard, uses his influence to get in, and Harvard basically said, "We don't care whatever money you have.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, your son isn't qualified to get in." So I think there's also a very personal element to this. So with all these decisions with Donald Trump, you have to get under the skin of why it is that he's attacking a particular country or institution and so on. And I think there's a very personal element to this as well that I don't think people have really sort of got under the surface of here.
Brooks Newmark, thank you for joining us this morning. Grateful to you for your time.
Chi Onura is Labour MP and chair of the Science, Innovation and Technology Committee. Good morning, Chi.
Good morning.
Very good to speak to you. So then, you think that we should be doing more to bring US scientists here. What would be the attraction? What can we offer them?
Well, we have a fantastic science base. I mean, we are one of the world's leading scientific nations, and it's so important for our economy, our competitiveness on the global stage. So, in fact, really, we're second to the US, and you might argue China, in terms of the quality of our science base. So, we can offer them a great environment to do research in. Obviously, we've got the same language. We have a stable government which really believes in the importance of science and innovation, particularly for our industrial strategy to get growth, to get prosperity all around the country, including here in Newcastle, where we've also got two fantastic universities. We've got fantastic research establishments across the country. So we would be offering them the chance to continue their research. And some of these scientists, at NASA or at the National Institute for Health and Research, they are doing really important work, so we can offer them the opportunity to continue that work in an environment which values science and the importance both to our economy, our well-being, our health. We saw that during COVID, and also to our culture. We value science and we know the difference that it can make, and we're not trying to close down science.
Can we afford them, I think, is the question, though. Tom Whipple, Times Science editor, makes this case here that the US is still the best in the world for science, not least its salaries. Do we have the money to offer, both by way of salaries but also then in research grants as well, to attract, to actually make an impact on these scientists who are leaving a sort of basket case science context in the US?
I'd say two things to that. Firstly, the UK spends, and this has been continued under the Labour government, increased under the Labour government, £20 billion a year of public money on science. There's also huge, significant investment from great companies such as AstraZeneca, Rolls-Royce, etc. But also, most scientists do not go into science for the salaries. Most scientists go into science because they want to expand human knowledge. They want to, push back the boundaries of understanding, or they want to find a cure for cancer or for the COVID vaccine, for example. So I think that I think what motivates most scientists, and we're not going to attract all the scientists who are undermined by the current President Trump's current approach. And just to say, I was out in the US a few weeks ago, and there's real, people of their life's work being undermined or attacked, or the threat of redundancies or actual redundancies. There's a real anxiety there. So we're not saying to attract all the scientists there,
Sure.
but there are a significant number of really excellent scientists. And we know that there's a scheme from Australia. The European Union is offering ease of access. So we need to be competitive, and that's why I wrote to the Science Minister, Lord Valens, asking him, to set out what we could do to offer these fantastic scientists somewhere to do their science.